Hey everyone, Vincenzo Calla here with VCalla Productions. Today I'm sitting here with Jenica Atwin, who is the Member of Parliament for Fredericton. Thanks, Jenica, for your time, and welcome to Let's Discuss Politics.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, it's so great to have you here, and let's get this interview started. So our first segment is called Jenica's Story, where we'll talk a bit about who Jenica is and her political history. So first, can you tell me a bit about yourself, your story, and how you got your start in politics?
Sure. So my name is Jenica Atwin. I am from Fredericton, New Brunswick. I kind of began my political journey back in 2018. So I did run in a provincial election for the first time. And I was really, interested as I continued to be in protecting the environment, in Indigenous reconciliation. And I had a particular interest, and I still do, around mental health as well, because my background is in education. So I come from a non-traditional career, I guess, for choosing politics. But I really think it's really helped me to have that kind of training as a teacher and to bring that perspective into the House of Commons. And so it was youth, absolutely, that inspired me to get involved. So my students and some of the barriers that they were experiencing, and just wanting to do all I can to make sure that they have a bright future. And I became a mom, so I've got two boys. They're 10 and 5 now, but they're ultimately as well my big inspiration. And they're Indigenous. My children are Wolastoq, so people of the beautiful Bountiful River. And so that Indigenous reconciliation piece is extra close to my heart and extra personal. And so I was not elected provincially in 2018. I kind of always, like to mention that for anyone who's interested in getting involved in politics. It can take a few times before you're successful. I got 902 votes. I'm very grateful for those folks for believing in me and giving me that kind of encouragement to keep going on that path. I was getting feedback, people saying thank you for raising issues that we're not used to hearing from politicians, or for asking questions that we hadn't heard others, speak about. So that's when I knew I was onto something, and that there was a reason that my voice was entering this kind of venue. And so then I was asked to run in 2019 to be the federal candidate for the Green Party at that time. And I said no. I was very worried about again, the prospects of representing such a large riding. So again, much bigger than the provincial boundaries from the 2018 bid that I had. And I want to do a good job. When you raise your hand for this kind of work, you have to be sure you're prepared for it. And so I thought about it, hummed and hawed. Again, I'm a mom. I had a career that I just loved, and I was thinking, can I do this? But every time I said no, I got a feeling in the pit of my stomach that was saying, you want to do this. This is something you're passionate about. It's a way to make change, which is what you always wanted to do. And so finally I said yes, and, began an incredible experience, knocking on every door in this riding, having those conversations with my community members, and I was successful. So I was the first woman elected for this riding, and I will not be the last. I always say that as well. Since that time, of course, a lot has transpired. Maybe you'll have some questions about that as well. But I was re-elected in 2021 as the Liberal member for Fredericton, and I just actually finished my first Liberal Party convention on the weekend, so that was a great experience as well. So, it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride, but I take every day as a learning opportunity. I've done a lot of growing as a person throughout this journey, so I'm just incredibly grateful every day that I get to be the representative for the most amazing community in the country. I'm a little biased, but I'll put that out there. But also, again, just to learn and grow and try to make positive change.
Well, definitely, and you mentioned, your election in 2019, and that was a historic election for you, both being the first woman elected in that riding, and the first Green Party candidate winning that riding, and you're a Liberal now, and we won't go too deep into like why you crossed the floor or anything. I'm sure there's a lot to talk about there, but I guess I just want to talk a bit about why you decided to run initially to become a federal member of parliament in 2019. What were sort of those motivations, and how was that sort of going from education, from being a teacher into politics like?
Well, and so I mentioned a little bit about, being inspired by my students and working for Indigenous communities in particular in provincial schools, and having my Indigenous children, my Indigenous family members. I'm a non-Indigenous person, but for me, it's about, supporting Indigenous communities and recognizing their rights uplifts us all. That's really the approach that I take. And so at the federal level is really where I'll be able to have an impact on issues that, affect Indigenous communities and individuals and rights. And so it was a natural fit I think I didn't realize that when I was first getting involved again on the provincial side of things. But really, it was always leading me down that federal path. Same with the environment. We certainly have to have positive collaboration with provinces and territories, but there is such a big role to play for the federal government as far as setting targets, achieving those targets, working with natural resources, working with our environment minister, working with agriculture. There's so many different aspects to the work that we need to do around climate. And so again, it's been incredible to have access to those departments, to have briefings that I was never able to have before, to fully understand, every angle of an issue, all the stakeholders and different organizations, and include their voices. And so that was really for me an important, kind of piece for going down that federal path. And then again on healthcare. So again, it's in the provincial purview. However, there is a big role to play for the federal government in upholding the Canada Health Act, no matter which jurisdiction you live in the country, and ensuring now with our new federal transfers, with the huge investment we just saw in the 2023 budget, to ensure that we're, guaranteeing levels of care, standards of care, and especially that piece around mental health, which, as I mentioned, is one of my main motivators as well. So I think that it's been, a great fit to be on the federal side of things. I'd like to stay as long as I can, Fredericton. But someday I would see myself potentially going back into to look after my province as well, because New Brunswick always has my heart.
Well, and definitely some important issues there, and issues like the environment and healthcare that I'm sure will come up in the next questions, and just so important to talk about those sorts of things. And having that background in education is really interesting, not one that a lot of members of parliament have, but a really important part that are very closely linked, obviously provincially, but seeing some of the issues that happen in schools, not just education based, but the issues that students have, and you get to see such like a broad aspect of family life in schools.
Mhm.
You see the students, and the issues that people are having, and definitely something that I'm sure helped form some of your thoughts as a federal member.
Absolutely. I always describe it as kind of where society intersects, especially at the high school level. I love all levels, but high school was my favorite. And it's because, yeah, you can see the different dynamics that are playing out, the different conversations, the different biases, the different ideologies that are in family life that come together. And then you also get to see, unfortunately, the barriers that exist. You see poverty levels that are unacceptable, here in the province, in particular in New Brunswick. You see that there's discrimination. There's still racism that exists. And so these are things that I'm passionate about addressing because we have to.
So we're going to go on to the next segment now, which is called Serving as an Elected Official, where we'll talk a bit about your experiences and achievements as an elected official. So before we go on to some of the work you've been doing on the Hill and some of that stuff, I want to talk about your community. So what has it been like to serve Fredericton as their MP since 2019?
It is an honor and a privilege. I say that every day because it truly is. The people of Fredericton are very unique. I love singing the praises of my community members because we're a university town in a lot of ways. We've got a few different campuses. We have Indigenous communities. We have Francophone, Anglophone communities. We're kind of this broad section, almost like a microcosm of Canada, and people are very informed. They know the issues, they deeply care about the issues, and they rightly hold their elected officials accountable. And I love that. That's why I got involved to begin with. I come from an activist background, and so I really appreciate, my constituents. I love to elevate their voices, and so that's really what it's all about. And Fredericton makes it easy because they're so active and engaged. We have higher than average voter turnout. We also have higher than average women population, which is great. We have a very young population as well. So it's a happening spot here in Fredericton.
So about your work now, I want to ask you what your favorite achievement or achievements have been as an MP since your first election.
Oh, well, there's many things. As I said, kind of as they happen, I try to take it all in and really appreciate the moment because I don't know how long this journey is going to last, but I know that I need to make an impact while I'm here. So I think probably the biggest thing I'd like to point to would be excuse me, is passing Bill S-219. So I was able to be the House sponsor for a Senate bill from Senator Jane McCullum. She's from Manitoba. an Indigenous woman, a residential school survivor, also has a background in dentistry and health and looking, after issues in her home community and for Indigenous peoples across the country. And so when she approached me to be the House sponsor, I was just over the moon because again, this is living my dream. This is what I came to do, is make a difference for Indigenous communities. And so S219 is to establish a National Ribbon Skirt Day on January 4th. And it comes out of a story from a little girl from Saskatchewan, Isabella Kulak, and her family who fought against discrimination. So she was basically, made fun of, shamed for wearing a ribbon skirt, which is a traditional piece of regalia for many Indigenous peoples, to a formal day at school. And she turned it into a positive, action of momentum where her community rallied around her. They had demonstrations on January 4th outside of her school in a positive way about educating, bringing awareness to the issue. It actually became an international movement. And so, I think that then the right next step was establishing a national day here in Canada. And for me, it's of course about honoring, traditional regalia and culture, but it's also about uplifting Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited peoples. And so for me, it's another concrete way of addressing the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada. It's a positive spin we can put on it. If we uphold and uplift and cherish Indigenous women and girls, it can deal with a lot of the impacts around misogyny and racism that actually funnel the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. So I find ways to be as strategic as I can, the ways that are going to have kind of the ripple effects to bring awareness to these issues. So I'm definitely proud of Bill S219 and reaching royal assent. And it's pretty rare for a backbencher like myself, but I like to aim high.
The next segment now is called The World of Politics Around Us, where we'll talk a bit about this world of politics that surrounds us. So first off, I wanted to ask, who is or who was another politician or politicians that inspire you as an MP?
So definitely Jack Layton. For me, I just remember seeing him. I want to date myself right now. March Music, watching him all the time, engaging with youth. I just thought that was so refreshing. It wasn't something I was seeing from other politicians. He was the first name I was really familiar with, and so I liked his approach. I liked that he was having those conversations, engaging in dialogue, including voices who are not traditionally included in the political sphere. And so Jack Layton certainly stands out for me. I think Canada would have been a different place had he not passed away. Um, I think more locally, looking, here in the community. My dad's a mayor, so I certainly am inspired by my father as well. And his approach has just always been get out and get involved in your community. It's not about politics; it's about the people. So we come from a background of sports, always being involved, playing hockey or softball or coaching as well, getting out there and meeting and working for kids and their families. And so I really have always been inspired by my dad as well.
And finally, now I want to ask you the final question that I always like to end with, which is, what do you think is an issue or some issues that you want to focus on more and that need to be focused on more?
So, I mean, really, it's the still the three issues that I always prioritize. So we have to keep going on the climate crisis. We have to use that as a lens in all of our decision making. We can't afford not to at this point, both literally and theoretically. We're paying, the price right now for decades of not caring, of not centering the environment. My cat is going to come into the screen.
No
I
worries.
also, as I mentioned, Indigenous reconciliation. For me, it's a way that Canada moves forward together. It's a way to recognize our treaty relationship. It's also a way to ensure economic prosperity for our country, for social justice. So that also has to be a lens we use in all of our decision making. And I'm really proud to say that our government is doing that. They are absolutely putting the environment and Indigenous communities at the forefront, and it wasn't always the case. And so I'm proud to be part of a government that does that. The other one, again, healthcare. Nothing else matters without healthcare. And specifically, our own well-being, our own mental health has to be our own individual priorities, but your governments at all levels, municipal, provincial, and federal, have to also prioritize your health. And so I will not stop, talking about that issue. We've come a long way. I think we've done a great job in destigmatizing, conversations around mental health or mental illness in particular, but we need the actions to follow. And so I won't stop until every member of my community has, quick, easy access to mental health services. And so those will continue to be my priorities moving forward.
And I do have a little bit of time left, and I want to quickly ask you. I know that following the last election, the Prime Minister appointed the first Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, a minister from obviously from your party, Carolyn Bennett. And I want to ask you, what have been sort of the things that, if you've been sort of communicating with her about this in your party, what are sort of the things that you hope to continue seeing as coming out of having a specific Minister of Mental Health to sort of look forward in a federal strategy to have mental health support? What are sort of the things you want to see happen, and especially this parliamentary session and going into the fall?
Mhm. Well, something that was noticeably absent from the 2023 budget was that specific mental health transfer itself. I know that significant investment is going in, like I said, to have those kind of strings attached around mental health, indicators and outcomes. But I would still like to see specific funding for mental health, because what I believe is actually would be very helpful would be to direct fund organizations on the ground. While of course we need to work with our partners in provinces and territories, sometimes working through government is slow, and as we know, we need that rapid access for mental health services. And there are organizations and not-for-profits that are ready to deliver that right now. I meet with them on a regular basis. And so I really push that kind of direct funding those organizations to do that work. And I meet with Minister Bennett quite often. She's very used to having conversations with me because she knows I'm passionate about this. And so I'm really glad to have that support and have that access to her. I know the other piece is around addictions. And so there's also comorbidities, which we have to talk about more and more. We were fortunate here in Fredericton to have funding for our Riverstone Recovery Center. So it's the IOT program. It's ensuring there's a safe supply, and just meeting with individuals who have gone through that program. They have now found stable housing. They found stable work. They're able to prioritize their mental health and their well-being. They're repairing relationships with their families and loved ones. So that the positive impacts from some of these programs that are coming out of Minister Bennett's portfolio, I just can't say enough good things about, because I'm seeing people turn things around. I'm seeing people have hope. And really, that's what it's about for me. So just the fact that we created a ministry for mental health and addictions, I think it was this huge signal to Canadians that we're taking this seriously. We're going to have actions and resources dedicated to it. And I think it certainly helps to have a physician, be at the helm as well. Oh, I have my sons. Want to say hi?
Hi.
Women in politics. You got to have your kiddos with you.
Exactly, exactly. It's so important to that family life, and maybe well, it's something that's so interesting, that's important too, seeing women in politics and having a family and balancing that with going back and forth from Ottawa. How is that and going back and forth from Ottawa and supporting your family as well?
Well, I mean, I say we take it one day at a time, that's for sure. When I was first elected, I had about 5 months of the regular kind of parliamentary schedule. And then, of course, the pandemic hit and everything changed. And so finally, we're getting back into that swing. So I took advantage, of course, of the hybrid model as much as possible. So I would be able to be here in Fredericton and be with my children as much as possible as well. But after becoming chair of the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Committee, I really need to be in Ottawa as much as possible physically there. So we just kind of work things out with their teachers, with our family here on the ground, to support us when I'm away or when they come with me sometimes. Luckily, my kids are, doing well in school, so it hasn't been an issue. But you cannot do this work without your support system. It takes a village is absolutely true. So I think for any women who are considering getting involved in politics, they know that they have that support behind them. I think if they're willing to put their hand up, and I could not do it without them. But I think my boys also realize that their mom's trying to do something pretty big. So it's also important to have their support.
Well, really cool and really important. That's all I have for today. Thanks, Jenica, so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having this conversation.
Well, it was so great having you, and make sure to go check out the other part here on YouTube for Top 10. If you're watching this on the date of the premiere, it's coming out on Friday. So Let's Discuss Politics is a VCalla production. Until the next video, I'm Vincenzo Calla, signing out.